Love this podcast? Support this show through the Acast supporter feature. It's up to you how much you give, and there's no regular commitment. Just click the link in the show description to support now.
Before we get started with another great edition of the Duke Loves Rasslin podcast, I do want to let you know, Zencastr.com. That's right, Zencastr.com. They are, without a doubt, my favorite website to head over to for all of these great conversations that you hear on the Duke Loves Rasslin podcast. Superior quality in sound. Also, they have a great video option as well if you need to record your videos. But the best part about it is the files are all split separately into MP3s. So you can edit them separately, you can put them together, do whatever you got to do. The main idea is Zencastr. Zencastr.com. That's Zencastr for all of your podcasting, video conferencing, even if you just want to have a great conversation with your loved ones. All your needs there online for communication, Zencastr has you covered. That's right.
You're locked in.
Look at what we have here, folks.
To the only show that matters.
The cream of the crop.
Duke Loves Rasslin.
And there is no one that does it better than
your host.
I have come here to chew bubblegum and kick ass.
The Duke.
And I'm all out of bubblegum.
My brothers, my sisters, welcome back. Welcome back to the Duke Loves Rasslin podcast, the show about pro wrestling and everything else. Let me tell you something. Happy New Year's Eve. For those of you who are going to be listening to this a little later, Happy New Year. That's right. We have made it to the end of 2021. I'm so happy that you have made it here with me. It's fantastic. Okay? We've been through a lot. But the fact that we're still here and we're still going, that lets me know that our tomorrows are even better than our yesterdays. Don't forget that. You better believe it. Listen, this week we have Walter Yeates, the secret agent man, the mysterious man. We're going to find out. He's a author. He is a journalist. He is an international man of mystery. We're going to break down all of the stuff about this guy because he's someone who legitimately is like a shadowy figure. We know who he is. You know he's affiliated with Pro Wrestling Illustrated. We know that he's been writing books. But who's the real Walter Yeates? We're going to get to the bottom of that. That's right. But before I get to any of that, I just want to say this. Listen, for all of you folks out there for New Year's Eve, please don't drink and drive. Don't drink and drive. Don't drink and drive. Be safe out there. I beg of you. Okay, so that's number one. That's always paramount. And, my New Year's wish for everybody is very simple. I wish and I hope that in 2022, everyone wakes up and realizes that all of the conflict and the nonsense and the he said, she said online, that's not real life. That's not real life, okay? In 2022, I want everybody to get back in touch with real life and not allow any kind of negativity to dictate how you are feeling in real life. All the Twitter beef and all the conflict and all the nonsense, just throw that stuff away, man. Okay? It should be entertainment. But if it's getting to the point where you're not entertained by the BS online, do yourselves a favor, hit the reset button. Remember, there's a real world out there with real things going on. And your real self-worth matters more than whatever online nonsense is going on. So that is my 2022 wish for everyone. I've seen a lot of people do all kinds of crazy stuff online. I've seen people react to it, having breakdowns and all kinds of just interesting things. That's enough, right? The Duke is telling you that's enough. In 2022, get back to the real world. Enough of the online persona, enough of the allowing these strangers, these nobodies, to dictate to you what your self-worth is. That's enough. Okay, it's time to move forward, forever forward. Don't look back. Brighter days are ahead of you. Darker days are behind you. So Again, that's my wish for 2022. But before that, don't drink and drive. Please don't drink and drive. That's right. Okay, that's enough of my mouth. I am going to get into this long-form conversation with Walter Yeates. And then for the final time, Tony Schiavone will close us out for 2021. Okay, you're not going to hear much long-form other talk from me. I want the conversation to kind of speak for itself because it's multi-layered, multifaceted. It's fantastic. So be safe out there, folks, and I'll see you in the new year. Here comes my conversation with Mr. Walter Yeates.
I'm Walter Yeates. I am a author. I recently just published Ganoran Trials of Chadonia. I am also the co-founder of Realm Studios, a multi-platform publishing company that you'll hear a lot of in the near future. And I also am a wrestling journalist. I work with PWI, starting up one of my own projects in the near future as well for wrestling and gaming. And I also have a background in political journalism, news journalism. I was at Standing Rock in December 2016, I do believe. So I do quite a bit. So yeah, that is who I am, and I'm definitely ready for this conversation.
Well, first of all, Walter, you are a man of international mystery. You know, very, very few people can say that they've laid eyes on the Walter Yeates. So this is very interesting to have you here on Duke Loves Rasslin. Things will be a lot of fun. And I want to start from the top here because there's a big debate about your name. And I understand that you got the whole James Bond thing going on. So, you know, is your name really Walter Yeates? Who knows? And I don't want to get into that because I understand that if you disclose that information, you might have to take me out. But what's the proper way to pronounce your last name? Because I hear Yates, I hear Yeates. I've had that no good Kevin McElvaney on the show, and he pronounces your name 3 different ways. I don't understand it. You think a guy who's your editor and works with you would actually understand how to pronounce your name, but you know it's Kevin, and you know how he is. So, what is the proper way to pronounce your name?
To be fair, I don't think I've ever told Kevin. Interesting. It is Yeates. That Yeates, and I know the background of this is the original Irish spelling. It transferred to Yates during the potato famine when a lot of Irish migrated to England because of the famine. I've seen different versions in Yeats in the United States, and Yates is kind of the more popular one, but Yeats is the original Irish spelling, and that goes back in my family, my very, very diverse family history. But yes, it is Walter Yeates.
Okay, so we just solved that mystery there, Walter Yeates. And I'm with you on the Irish thing because I found out, ironically, through the Jamaican side of my family, that I have a lot of Irish in my DNA and what have you. And in fact, I believe it was my grandmother's grandmother was a white Irish lady who lived in Jamaica, Bennett, which I thought was English, but it's actually Irish. So I'm going to test you here because I got to make sure that your Irish roots actually check out, Walter. Do you know this little ditty here? I'm a rambler, I'm a gambler, I'm a long way from home. And if you don't like me, then leave me alone. I eat when I'm hungry, I drink when I'm dry. If the moonshine don't kill me, I'll drink till I die. All right, tell me you know that song.
I've heard that somewhere. Yeah.
Okay, that's the moonshine.
Fog and Mollies do that.
Okay, the Fog and Mollies did do that. Okay, Walter. Okay, all right. So you check out here your Irish roots. Okay. I wasn't going to give you Irish eyes. I wanted to give you one that really check your street cred in terms of being Irish. So you just passed there. So to all our Irish cousins out there, Walter's one of us. Okay, so we figured that part out. All right. The next thing is your avatar. It is a cartoon of an old school reporter. He's a little husky. You know, he looks like he's always on the run. So he's had a few burgers and what have you, which is traditional for any kind of reporter. He's wearing a cool hat, and he just looks like a really, really cool dude who is in the know. So I need to know the answer to this right now. He's probably about, in his 50s, early 60s and what have you. Is that actually you, Walter, or is this some kind of sleight of hand? Is this some trickery that you have going on here?
there's a story behind that avatar and when it came about. It's been around about 4 going on 5 years. Because when I mentioned at the beginning, I was at Standing Rock. There was a digital artist who learned of that after I was there, and for everyone listening, he's referring to my Smooth Wrestling avatar because my author and publishing avatars are different, but that the one that's people mostly know me as of right now. That was made for me after that. Like he said, like, you were at Standing Rock. I was like, yeah, and I did all this coverage reporting, stayed on site during a negative 40-degree blizzard, and all those stories. And he made that for me for free. And I put that as my avatar on all of my kind of wrestling stuff back then. And all of my reporting stuff, I use that as the avatar. It's still there on 2 of my accounts. So it's basically a reference to Smooth Gentleman, which is a name I was first called back when I was like 18, doing a podcast with Dr. Jennifer Alston Lee, and someone on MySpace. I remember she was from England, and she said, "You definitely are a smooth gentleman." I was like, "Mine." And so pretty much since then, I've attached that name to basically everything that I've done. And that he asked me what kind of avatar what I want, and I basically was like, "Yeah, do like the whole 30s, 50s type of look for a reporter," and he did that, and I attached that to a couple of my Twitter accounts, and that is what a lot of people in wrestling know me as. I don't think I've really ever had my own picture up for my avatar on Twitter for wrestling goes.
And see, this is what I'm talking about. So if you were to ever show up at an event, Walter Yeates, not Yeates, okay, Kevin McIlvaney, Walter Yeates. If Walter Yeates ever showed up at an event and he said, "Hey, I'm Walter Yeates, Pro Wrestling Illustrated. I'm the guy that writes all the cool stuff, international coverage." I don't think people would believe that you're actually Walter Yeates because you look nothing like your avatar. Okay. You're not some little chubby guy. You're actually a skinny guy. You're not old. You're actually young. And from what I understand, you could possibly be Japanese. And that's part of the reason why you have the inside track on everything happening in Asian wrestling, including, New Japan and what have you. So let's talk about this as well. Because, I took Japanese in 3rd grade, so I know a little something. Ohayo gozaimasu, konnichiwa. So I want to know right now, we already figured out that you're Irish. Are you also Japanese?
I am not part Japanese. I unfortunately do not speak any Japanese. What I interact with people on the wrestling Twitter in Japanese because I started realizing there were a lot of Japanese people starting to follow me because I was covering a lot of New Japan, and the fans started following me and interacting. I was like, it's really not fair for me to try to always get them to use Twitter's not that great translation feature to try to see what I was understanding, or what I was saying. So I started translating it on my own and trying to communicate with some of the people who were reading my work and respecting my work. So I started doing that, and that's actually been helpful. A lot of some of the most fun people I speak to on Twitter are Japanese fans, a completely different type of fan in Japan. Also in Mexico, from what my last interactions with fans in Mexico than those in English first speaking countries. I have noticed that for quite commonly noticed that, but I am not Japanese or speak any Japanese yet. That is something I do want to do at some point because of all the wrestling I watch, I should speak Japanese.
So I got to ask this question here, Walter, because it's kind of interesting that you cover so much Japanese wrestling. You cover wrestling in China, like Middle Kingdom wrestling, and those are my folks over there. Shout out to the whole crew at MKW. In fact, my first interview here on Duke Loves Rasslin was Adrian, the head honcho over there at Middle Kingdom Wrestling in China. He was the first person I ever interviewed on this show nearly 6 years ago. So you and I, not only are we Irish cousins, not only are we a couple of handsome guys, but we also are into pro wrestling over in Asia, including in China. So look, man, we got things going on here, you and I, Walter. But I want to know about something very important, because I think guys like you tend to be Jason Bourne or what's the other one that the guy Jim from The Office played in that series? I think it's on Amazon. What's that show? Have you seen the show where he plays this nice analyst and what have you, and then come to find out he's really the CIA badass?
Jack Reacher?
Yeah, it might be that. It might be that.
Hold on, I'll find out.
Yeah, we need to know the answer to who this guy is, because I think he might be you as well. I think that's all based on your real life. And that's part of the reason why people know so very little about you, because in reality, you're just this international man of mystery.
Jack Ryan.
Jack Ryan. Yes. Okay. So Walter Yeates, Jack Ryan is pretty much the same. So are you some kind of super secret agent man? Is that what's going on with you here?
Not quite. I have done a lot of things that I wasn't public about, as far as the writing in quiet that I didn't say anything about for 2 years publicly. But I don't know, my reporting, whether it's, I keep a lot of it separate, so I don't really cross over on some of the political reporting that I did with the wrestling reporting. So a lot of it's been kept separate, and I also have a separate account for talking about sports that I'm a fan of. So all of it's separate. So I think that's kind of what goes to it. So I try not to cross over and have it so fans of this one thing of mine will be able to see that whenever they want, not all the other stuff. So I don't really think I'm that mysterious. If people, I guess I can see how some people would think that.
Well, this is the word on the street here, Walter, and I'm being a little tongue in cheek here, but I'm getting to a point. It is a legitimate thing that people are very curious about you, but at the same time, they don't try to mess with you, because it's like, this guy is probably like some real big deal. So let me just be cool. That's Walter. He does the writing of the wrestling in Asia and around the world, and he's gonna be doing Mexico, whatever. He seems like a really cool guy. He's clearly talented in his journalism, and that's it. I don't know what he looks like. I don't know what he sounds like. I don't even know if he is an earthling or if he is some kind of extraterrestrial. I just know that that's Walter Yeates or Yeates, depending on who says your name. But people don't know much about you. Were you aware that you're so interesting to people? Like they actually are curious about you as a person?
I mean, that's always been the goal. I try to interact with people on Twitter at times when they reach out about anything that I'm reporting on. Most of those are fans in Japan, so they're probably a little bit more familiar with me. They will talk and not literally just insult something for impressions, but that's another story. But I mean, like, yeah, I can understand that. Like, my picture's not up on a lot of my wrestling stuff, but if you do go to the link in my bio, that does go to my actual portfolio of articles and stuff, and that does have my picture there. A really bad one, but it is my picture. But yeah, I mean, like, I can understand. Like, I try not to say things just to get impressions on Twitter. That might be a carryover from a lot of the time in political journalism, and I try to separate myself from influencers than as a reporter. And there is a difference, even though it seems like a lot of people don't know that difference, but there's a big difference there. So I try to stand out a little bit and carry myself a little bit differently on the Smooth Wrestling account, because that is technically my journalist account. So I try to be professional as possible there.
Well, I'm curious about what you just said there, Walter, because it lends itself to something that I've been talking about a lot over the past couple of years, and it's these clearly defined lines. Are you a journalist? And I'm not saying you in particular, but I'm just talking about anyone who covers pro wrestling. Are you a journalist? Are you an analyst? Are you just some fan who's just doing something? Like, what are you? Because people who pretend to be journalists, or they try to occupy the space of journalists, but then they're trying to get themselves over. And then next thing you know, they're taking jobs with promotions and things like that. It's like, that's not, a journalist is not traditionally that. You know what I mean? You're supposed to cover the news. You're supposed to dissect and go after the truth and put it out there and what have you here. And it just seems like you just said, there's a lot of people who don't know the difference. Do you feel pro wrestling could benefit from deeper more clearly defined lines in terms of the actual media side of things?
I believe society in general and wrestling could both benefit from that because there is a difference, and that's a thing I've talked about on political news journalism as well. Like there's a difference that gets to me is like there's a lot of people. I mean, there's bloggers who are basically fans who write about XYZ. Companies give their opinions on that. Again, I have no problems with any of these groups at all. Just say what you are and stick with that. And there's influencers. Some of them do interviews and stuff, but you'll see them in a lot of the gear of promotions and doing photo shoots with wrestlers and taking pictures and pictures with wrestlers and everything. That's more influencing. You make sure to say certain things during broadcast of certain events to get over. You'll brand your name as something to do with that promotion or that you love that promotion, and then there's columnists who write columns. Was popular back in the 80s and 90s. There's columnists who will write about wrestling, but they don't necessarily investigate and do that type of more of the journal stuff of trying to get stories and enterprise stories, news stories that they'll just write about things they see that could be interesting or not. And then there's journalists who will dig into numbers, try to interview people, not necessarily try to befriend people, and will disclose when they are friends with someone and they're covering them, that will try to, check back with sources and be like, I'll give you some, most of the times typically there can be a 24, 48 or 72 hour window when you're covering on someone to give them a chance to respond to something. And some of the articles I've done with places that I won't mention by name here because interesting people, I'll put it to you that way. You'll see where I've mentioned XYZ didn't respond, and it was like then I typically will give 48 hours to respond to something that I'll tell you, got this, do you have a comment on it? And I'm trying to do the investigative part of it and trying to be fair, ethical, even if it's something that may be negative towards that person, you give them a chance to respond. Like, for example, I reached out to Travis Banks with everything with Millie McKenzie was going on and during speaking out, and she released text messages, everything was out there. I reached out to Travis Banks, gave him a chance to respond. He did not respond. So I always try to do that when I am covering something important or something that is important. It's like so there's definitely different lines, and I've never taken pictures with wrestlers. I honestly don't even feel comfortable having certain merchandise. Like I don't have merchandise of any promotions. Like it's that one might be just a personal thing where it just feels a little bit weird doing it. But I probably might be taking a little bit too far on that one. I'm not saying everyone should do that, but I won't take pictures in that merchandise and put it on social media or anything like that, because that's getting into the influencer realm, in my opinion. So it's like I think there's definitely clear and defined lines, which again, I have no problems with any of them. Just be upfront with which one you are trying to be, because there's a different set of ethics and guidelines that come with each one of those, to be honest with you. So that's where it comes to me, is where like, yeah, I studied some of this in college and everything, and I just always just try to be ethical and fair, because also you always have to worry about, you can be sued for saying certain things. If you libel or slander somebody, you can be sued for that. So it's very important, even to your own benefit, to make sure you're being on your P's and Q's and being ethical in what you're doing when it comes to reporting art. Because at some point, someone's going to get sued, and you're not really going to have much fallback on if you weren't paying close attention to the guidelines of ethical conduct if you're wanting to be a journalist. It's a long answer, but I was trying to make sure I got it to everything.
It's a perfect answer, and here's why it's a perfect answer. I'm not a journalist, and that's one of the first things that I make clear right off the jump. I'm not a journalist. I didn't go to school for journalism. I don't have a journalism degree. I'm a political science guy. I'm a government guy. But because I'm a political science guy, because I'm a government guy, because that's what I study, because that's my arena, ethics is very important to me. And just like you said, you have to be very careful, because you can easily get sued for a lot of things. So I make sure that if I'm going to take a hard line on something, or if I'm going to stand on something when I'm providing analysis, I better be willing to take whatever comes with that. And more importantly, I better make sure I have my facts straight, because if not, you're leaving yourself wide open for all kinds of litigious issues there and what have you. I also don't break news. I'll bring newsmakers on this show to break the news themselves, and then I'll analyze the news, but I don't break news. And part of the reason why, once again, because if you make a mistake and you start reporting on something that's just blatantly not true, you can't unring a bell. So, and you see a lot of people make that mistake all the time. But what's interesting about it, Walter, is that a lot of people take issue with those who are very serious about defining, okay, this is a line I'm not going to cross. This is who I am. This is the space that I occupy. Do you ever get backlash personally over the fact that you are so strict about the fact that you're going to cover the news a certain way and that's it? And you're not going to, like you said, you're not out there buying the T-shirts, and you're not out there taking pictures with the wrestlers. You're not being a fanboy. You're being somebody who legitimately is just covering the entertainment medium, so to speak.
No, I mean, honestly, if that's what you want to do, you're not going to get any heat for that, to use a wrestling term. And I also stay out of typically the big arguments that seem to always happen in wrestling. So, I mean, I don't really get into a lot of that stuff. So it's like, no, I don't really get any heat for it. I do see things from people that are saying they are journalists that does irk me at times, because it's just like there's a certain set of standards. And I did have a public disagreement with someone that did that recently. I probably shouldn't really go that deep into it, but people who are following me on Twitter probably saw that. And it had something to do with someone that I interviewed recently, and someone said something about them that just wasn't true, because I was watching the program live as they were saying it, and no one who claims to be a journalist could make that interpretation legitimately, and there was just some kind of ulterior motive there. But so not really. I mean, like in that case, there's a couple of their fans who wanted to say something to me, but great thing about social media is I can just plain and simple ignore you. And if you're not worth my time, and if you're not making great arguments, I'm just going to ignore you, because my college background's in political science and philosophy, and a lot of my focus in political science was also on journalism. I'll never make the argument that you have to have a journalism degree to do that, to be a journalist. It's great to have a good background. And I think if you're going to cover politics, you need to have some kind of major or minor in political science as well to understand what it is you're covering. Because I've met a lot of journalism degrees in the political realm who weren't up to speed in some things. So it's just like from the philosophy background, if you're just going to make arguments that are based around ad hominem, and you're just appealing to authority, or you're just making all these fallacial comments, I'm just not going to really. I'm going to give you a couple of minutes, and then after that, I'm just done, because I've got a lot more important things to do than just argue with people who are just going to be purposely obtuse about something. So I don't get into a lot of that stuff too much. So I don't really see that much backlash, because I just try to stay away from just pointless arguments.
And that's why he is the international man of mystery, Mr. Walter Yeates, PWI, author, person who does things that we can't talk about because he's out there saving the universe. You wrote a book, and I want to be clear with you about something. I'm very upset with you. I've always wanted to write a book, and I always thought that I would be capable of writing something that would be a solid work, and it would get the job done. And then I read what you wrote, 300 pages plus, and I said to myself, well, I ain't ready. You created a whole world, and the attention to detail of everything. It's very rare that you read a book and you feel like you're actually watching a movie. And I'm one of those people that I'm really into sci-fi, although I'm into a particular type of sci-fi, not so much regular fantasy. I'm into aliens. I'm into extraterrestrials. I'm into people or beings that are in faraway galaxies that interact with humans in some way, shape, or form. And just the complexity of that, because I think that that's not only possible, but may have already happened, or it may actively be happening. So I'm always curious about that sort of thing, and just the struggle of society, and who's going to maintain order, who's going to be in power, where's leadership coming from, all of those complex things. And I got to give you credit, because there are elements of all of that in your book. So let's talk about this. First and foremost, who the hell do you think you are to create a whole new world? And how do you even have the brain capacity to do all of that?
Oh, well, that's interesting that's what you lead with, because that's that's actually something I did go into on the Amazon page for the novel. Again, it's called Ganoran Trials of Chadonia, and I started my first thoughts on the world itself of Ganoran. That started popping in my mind when I was 8. Never thought anything of that I was going to go anywhere or do anything with it, and it wasn't really until I was 18 that I really started to dive into it a little bit more. Actually, there's a little story behind that. I was on a AP U.S. history trip to D.C., and on one of the bus rides, I was sitting next to a guy. I won't say his. I was about to say his name, but I probably shouldn't do that. I was sitting next to a classmate, and this was right when the Blind Guardian Nightfall of Middle Earth album came out. And he was a power metal fan. I never really listened to metal at that point, never really even knew what it was, despite I grew up watching Power Rangers, and I didn't even know this until a couple months ago that the intro to Power Rangers, when you listen to it back, that's a heavy metal song. So he was like, "Hey, Walter, you want to listen to this?" I was like, sure, why not? And it was those who don't know, Blind Guardian is a all German band, I do believe, and they tell a lot of stories, and a lot of Nightfall of Middle Earth is based off of Tolkien's work. And I listened to like the couple of first like 3 or 4 songs. I was like, they're telling an entire story in like song form, and it's like I'm into this. And so basically after that, I started listening to more of their work. I was always interested in fantasy. I read The Hobbit when I was like 13. They tried to stop me from reading The Hobbit. It's like, there's too much violence in this, blah, 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 blah. I was like, I'm gonna read it and take the AR test. Just leave me alone, please. It was like, and I was perfectly fine afterwards. So it was like, so that's what was my first real introduction to that was the Hobbit. And then after that, around that same time when Nightfall on Middle Earth came out, that's when I believe the trilogy was starting for the Lord of the Rings, and I really got into that. And so during this time, I started building more the world of Ganoran, started defining the continents and everything. And Ijana, where Guardians or Ganoran Trials of Chadonia takes place, it was the second continent I created. It's a matriarchal continent, but the novel goes into how it became that way. So read it to find out how. You'll find out pretty soon. That's another hint of how that came about. And I started building that. And one of the inspirations for why I wanted to do that was from Lord of the Rings in the character Eowyn, played by Miranda Otto. And she's my favorite character in the stories and movies, films, books. So I always was wondering, like, even in Game of Thrones, there was Brienne of Tarth. There was always in a lot of these stories, even The Witcher season 1 anyway. I'm not doing season 2 yet. So there's always seems to be one woman who, in this medieval setting, is a warrior. Go out to field, always one. And I was always like, why not more? And this is back when I was 18. So this is when I first started building this, even started like building everything. So I was like, why not have an entire society, an entire continent? Like, Ijana is a very large continent. I won't get into specifics of how large because that's spoilers for future things. But Ijana is gigantic. And so I wanted to basically have a continent that was a matriarchal society that's been that way for thousands of years and build it to why, and where women were warriors, because surprisingly, there's a lot of misconceptions about sword fighting and combat. Like swords on average weigh about 2 pounds, and shields aren't that extremely heavy either. So the concept that women could never swing a sword or that they should all be archers is just a huge misconception, because it takes a lot of upper body strength to be an archer with specific types of bows. You have the draw strength you need is significant. Swinging a sword and having that technique is less strenuous than that. So that there's a lot of misconceptions there. Same thing you could say with spears, even though spears aren't in Ijana as far as weapons wise, and all those other types of weapons. So I built this world and this continent, and I was like, I want to see how this goes. So I built it, and when it came time, because Realm Studios, we quietly launched it in December 2019. When it came to writing the first Ganoran book, my partner in the company, Richard O'Sullivan, he was basically like, well, let's go for it. And I picked starting in Ijana because I thought it would be really interesting, especially after, things like speaking out and all those just horrific scandals of things going on. It's like, let's just start in Ijana and see if people are going to be interested in a story like this, because my one fear of starting in a genre is this, this still could very much happen as the publicity and marketing gets more and people hear about, is that a lot of, we'll call them incels, will hear about it and want to bash it for that reason. I'm like, at this point, I'm just like, go ahead, insult the book, and just tell me how much you don't know about that kind of combat, and go ahead, just tell me that you just hate women and how that I'll just mark it off of that and basically embarrass you. So I was like, I wanted to tell that story, and there's going to be multiple stories after. So that's kind of how Ijana became the starting point. And during the process, there was a couple of women that I was friends with that I was like, hey, could you read this and just let me know what you think about this type of concept, just to see, because I was thinking, is this cool, or if anything. There was a friend, her daughter was around 13 years old. She read it, started crying when she started hearing about the concept. I was like I didn't really have any concept that was going to mean something like that, especially to young girls and women. That's not what I thought. I don't have that kind of ego to think that I was going to do something like that. But speaking to more women, and I do get it. Because there's just not this type of setting. In a lot of fantasy things, because of Ganoran there's no magic in Ganoran whatsoever. It's all Earth-like, put it that way without spoiling anything. It's very Earth-like in the fact that this could very much be happening on Earth. There's different flora and fauna, but it's very realistic in the fact, I call it realistic fantasy, which isn't even a real genre yet, but it's not high fantasy, it's not low fantasy. I call it realistic fantasy, that it would be very much, this could happen here, but it is on a different planet. And that whole concept of women acting in these roles and having power in government, having power in military actions, and on the field of battle, fighting not for some guy they want to marry or something, because it's where they live and their ideals and their traditions that they're fighting for, that meant something to people women I've talked to about the novel, and some of them have already started reading the novel. So I'm actually very glad now that I started any genre, because there's just a lot there that I think that everyone will be able to take from. And I honestly kind of was hard on myself, saying maybe I should have made this longer in certain places, but because I know a lot of the follow-ups are going to be a bit longer in the main series. So, but I'm very happy with the feedback that I'm getting back early, and I would love to hear your feedback about it as well, since I've been rambling for 3 minutes.
Well, you'll definitely have to read my review, because I did post one right before we started there. So you'll get a piece of that. I find it fascinating. And I guess that's really what it is. I don't want to spoil the book in any way, but I do want to talk about it from a global standpoint. Because I watch Game of Thrones, and that really, again, it's not traditionally the sort of thing that I'm into. I do lean more towards maybe a Dune, obviously. I don't know if you've seen Foundation on Apple Plus. I think that's fantastic. That's actually what Dune and Star Wars are inspired by. So this amazing world and all of these different plots and subplots and things going on. And I felt like that as I was reading your book. And I just don't, you're one person and you were able to create all of this stuff and these complex characters dealing with these complex issues and the way that you're so descriptive about, like you said, the sword and what people are thinking and how they're feeling and you know, how we got from point A to point B, and this one is standing up for that one, and that's why people are leading, even though this is an older person. And there's just so many different things going on that are just like, wow, this is really detailed. And because it's so detailed, because it's so descriptive, I'm in it. Like I feel it. And so even if I don't necessarily understand something at first, because it's so descriptive, I can follow it easy. So I end up, oh, okay, I get it now. There were moments of that. And it just blows me away that one guy was able to create all of that. You know, like who edited that thing? Did you edit that yourself?
No, we used an editor. Her name is Amanda. I can't remember her last name off the top. It's in the book, by the way, for people who want to see there. The editor is credited in the book. She went through and she did edit it. Didn't really do much to the story itself. That really didn't change in editing at all. That actually, I have a very long process where it comes to keeping notes for everything in the novel, and I'm not sure this is much of a spoiler. There's many different types of projects coming for Ganoran, so I have a lot of notes already, and I keep referencing back to that because there's 47 different tribes in Ijana at the current state of when the novel begins. And there's a map there that you'll be able to see to help you follow along with that. There's also a map of Ganoran so that you'll be able to see that as well and to compare it to the other places. So it is a process of getting everything the way I want it to be, because the most difficult part was trying, because not every tribe has a lot of detail as to who they are, their culture, and everything within the novel, but most of that has already been fleshed out. And I wanted to try to get a reference to as many tribes as possible and have someone from that tribe show up. And there are, and in future iterations in multiple platforms, there will be more tribes focused on and see who and what they are and as to why. And the detail is that's just something I've always, that's the one thing I was like, man, if I had 20,000 more words in this area and that area, there would have been even more detail, but that's coming. That's just something I always loved in novels, in movies and film, is world building and making and putting weight on things. Shout out to Jonathan Ridgway. We talked to him about this a lot, even in wrestling and sports, like the weight of things matter. So I build up characters that even if in the case they die, there is a weight to that. So every character needs to feel like an actual person and not just a prop there that if it goes away, who cares? So that's a big thing I wanted to really focus on. So even if a character doesn't seem to be a major protagonist or antagonist in Ganoran Trials of Chadonia, when and if they show up again, probably mostly in most cases it's going to be when they show up again, there's going to be a weight to them because you already know where they came from, why they're here, their motivations as to what happened, and stuff like that. And I will give a tiny little hint. There are characters that show up for a brief period of time in Ganoran Trials of Chadonia that they will come up again and are going to have extended stories. And so that is something to look out for because I try to make sure everything is important, has weight. There's just nothing's really just thrown in to just be there to take up a word count. So there is a lot of time goes into that aspect as far as my creation process.
I love it. I love it, man. I'm so impressed. I'm jealous. I would challenge you to a match where I would give you a proper thrashing for having the audacity to create your own fantasy world and it be actually good. So now I'm waiting to see what comes next and what have you. I would challenge you to a match and I would straighten you out in the ring. But then I realized that because you're a guy who has this brain capacity to create your own worlds here, because you're a guy who's done so well with people not necessarily knowing what you look like and who you are and all this other stuff. I feel like if I were to challenge you to a match, you would probably show up and just completely destroy me before I even could get started. So instead, I'm just going to demand that you promise on the record right now not to beat me up. So can we get that out of the way?
I promise to not beat you up.
Okay, there you go. Well, you sounded like you didn't want to say that. I feel like you begrudgingly said that there, Walter. So what's that all about? Did you have plans to kind of do away with me, or am I going to end up in the book where you're going to do away with my character or something?
Well, I can only say that only a few people have never turned heel, like Manuel Toyota, maybe Ricky Steamboat. I mean, only a few people have never turned.
Well, and the fact that you brought up Toyota, who's my favorite other than Ric Flair, that's just awesome. So that's pretty cool. Listen, Walter, I want to get back to wrestling for a second here, because I want to know, and I'm understanding your whole vibe a lot better just from talking about all this stuff. What's the biggest misconception that people have about pro wrestling outside of the United States? Because I think that this lends itself also to the genre that you write about, even in your book.
Well, I think the biggest misconception for a lot of people, well, this is just going off of Twitter, but a lot of people seem to not think it exists, which to me is hilarious, especially when you go back to the history of just like El Santo and Black Shadow and how they basically their rivalry built an entire culture of wrestling in the country of Mexico that lasts today, where it's almost a part of like literally the culture in some ways. Even when CMLL is a little bit down, it's still a big thing in Mexico, and that all of another big misconception from I say English speaking fans, mostly in the West, is that all wrestling needs to be sports entertainment, or that only the good wrestlers are on TV in the United States. And it's just like, I don't know how that's a misconception in the digital age, where literally with streaming platforms, you can have, I would off the top of my head say 30, 50 promotions that you can watch around the world on streaming platforms at any point in time now at this point. So it's like, I don't understand if that's a purposeful thing, or a lot of fans just don't care and just like getting the impressions, the LOL the hate talks on getting impressions for hating on something. But that's one of the biggest misconceptions is, and I don't know, just like looking at the different legacies and everything. Like New Japan right now is, they're become an international company, and their dojo system, if you go back to 1972, is historic. And they expanded the LA dojo to the New Zealand dojo, and how the training there, it's just different. And a lot of people also, even more fans who aren't trying to be trolly, or they are more knowledgeable, they keep saying the dojo system in Japan. That's a huge misconception. There is not one dojo system in Japan. There are many dojo systems, and New Japan has cranked out draws, great wrestlers for decades. I mean, if you want to start listing off the people who've made money across, not just in Japan, across the world, and who are great wrestlers, you can just go from like Muda, Hashimoto, Liger, Chono, Nakamura, Okada. He's a second level, but he got trained by Ultimo Dragon first. But there's just so many guys, and for years Tanahashi might be one of the best wrestlers of all time when he really gets done. There's like so many have come through there. And it's just like just the conception that these wrestlers aren't as good because they're not wrestling for WWE has always been laughable to me, especially when you just look at the dojo system and how that works, and just with your own eyes, just look at the quality of wrestling and how it's just different to a lot of places. And like Mexico doesn't get really much talk, I guess, through its working agreement with AEW now, that Triple and Impact. That Triple A gets some talk, but CMLL is the oldest promotion in the world. They still have a lot of talented people there. There are some issues with the product, mostly it still had behind the scenes creative stuff. Still, I think they still have like a 1965 mindset, but that's a different beast. But there's a lot of talented wrestlers there that you've seen in New Japan, because they've been partners. See, off the top of my head, remember since May 2011, they've been official partners. If I think that's the date. So I mean, there's just a lot of great wrestling around the world. Like Rev Pro in the UK is really good, and there's a really good trained wrestlers there as well. And emerging areas like China, regardless of what you think about the government, which I hope people do have things and thoughts about that, but the wrestling companies are separate from that, and it's wrestling starting to become a thing there. Korea had a big wrestling tradition. There's still some independent promotions there, so there's just wrestling literally everywhere. And if you don't like something, why spend all your energy hating on it? Just go watch literally something else. There's just so much. And you mentioned All Japan Women's Pro Wrestling earlier, which is I fell in love with that promotion and Manamai Toyota. And there's so many great wrestlers there. Like Stardom is starting to gain steam. They have a long way to go to get to where AJW was, but there is hope there. And I think that's just great for women in the business, because there needs to be a place. This might be going off on a tangent, but it's a shame that Shimmer, after some of the talent they've had there, still no one can manage to think that maybe we should get this on TV in the United States, whether that's a indictment on wrestling fans in the United States or not. That's not really for me to decide. It is a shame, though, that there aren't more people behind that. So I just think there's just a big thought process that needs to just expand your view. There's more things out there. There's a lot of good things out there. Not everything's outside of the United States is good. Not everything in the United States is good. It's just be open-minded. If you don't like something, why are you trying to hide behind like cartoon characters? Which is funny. I have a cartoon character, but I don't try to troll things, and just hate on stuff for no reason. Like I just don't get. Like, they're still professionals. They're still human beings. They still go through mental health issues. Like, why are you going out of your way to hate on them and say they don't belong in the business and they should retire and stuff like that? And that stuff that irks me a bit. I don't really see that from Japanese fans, and so so there's a lot of misconceptions of how wrestling is approached and viewed upon outside of the world. Because in Japan, it's literally covered like a sport, and big magazines cover it. So it's just like there's a different respect for it. Why that is not the way it is in the United States anymore, if that is a Vince McMahon product, probably has a lot to do with it. I don't know, but it's just different elsewhere, especially in Mexico and Japan.
You are coming hot and heavy here, Walter Yeates. Jeez, he took the gloves off there, folks. He's calling out all of the troublemakers. I love it. I love it. Listen, Walter, why don't you let everybody know the best way they can check everything out? I want to know, how can folks get a copy of the book? How can they check out anything that you're writing? The whole 9 yards. Follow you on social media. Like, plug away, brother.
Oh, well, the Ganoran Trials of Chadonia right now, it is ebook only. Supply chain due to the pandemic is messed up. So long story short, the crates of books right now can be 3 to 5 times as expensive as they normally are. So we're planning on Realm Studios is the publishing company that I do co-own as well. And we're also looking for authors as well. If anyone wants to pitch us something, there is a process for that. The website for Realm Studios is www.realmstudios.com. If you look around, there's ways to get in touch with us. If you want to get in touch with me on my author account on Twitter. It's WY Realm, RHELM. By the way, it's RHELM is the way we spell the Realm. Realm Studios also is on Twitter at Realm Studios, it's RHELM STUDIOS. Also, Ganoran Chadonia is the Twitter for the book itself. We're also on LinkedIn. You can find me on LinkedIn, Walter Yeates, YEATES, as we talked about earlier. Or also Realm Studios, RHELM Studios is also on LinkedIn. On our Facebook, which we've already got over 200 likes already, which we really just started publicizing a couple of weeks ago. You can find us there, Realm Studios. Also have an account on a fan page account on Realm. Actually, I have two on Facebook. There's one that is like Smooth Rest or something like that for the wrestling one. You'll find me. And there's also WY Realm for me on Facebook for that account. And we're also on Instagram as well, Realm Studios on Instagram. If you find me in one place, I will direct you everywhere else. It's the easiest way for that. And yeah, my wrestling account's Smooth Wrestling, and you'll be able to find that and everything I'm doing there. And there's other projects coming in the wrestling sphere, wrestling and video game sphere in the very near future. So I am lots of places, and you can find me literally everywhere.
Now, Walter, before I let you go, I got to ask, is there a way that I can convince you to punish? I don't want to say hurt, but I do, punish in some way. You're creative guys, you can figure it out, swords and all that stuff. Can we punish Kevin McElvaney over at Pro Wrestling Illustrated and his favorite advisor over there, Harry Burkett? Can we punish these guys for some of the rankings that they've put out over the past year? Because I've been very upset and disappointed for years, especially at some of the people that they've put at number one on the various rankings. So can I get you to kind of help me out here and do something about this?
I don't have anything to do with the rankings. I mean, I don't have anything to do with the rankings. I do think it's entertaining how people get worked up. I'm just like, I do think that's entertaining, but even some wrestlers get worked up about it. And I'm just like, wow, it's serving its purpose if people are getting worked up about it. I don't know. I mean, personally, I honestly think it is time. I don't like the gender requirement or gender. You have to wrestle intergender matches for a woman to be ranked, because I would have to go back and look, but I don't think there is a chance that people like Bull Nakano, Manama Toyota, Asia Kong wouldn't have been at least one before. Top five, definitely, because I struggle to find a better wrestler in history of ever than Manama Toyota. And so it's like, I think it's time to get away from the gender thing and just be like, you're a wrestler, go wrestle. So I think you can still do that and still have the same process there. I know that would take away from the women's rankings, and I'd say with that, just replace that with like a rookie thing. You've been in the business 1 to 3 years. Here's the top 50 to 100 of those individuals across the world. Again, no gender there. And tag teams, I don't believe there is a gender requirement for the tag teams. So I was like, there isn't. So it's just like, for that, I just think that's my biggest thing I would change immediately, is let's just get rid of the gender requirements, because there are women out there. Like I am a big fan of my Iwatani's work, and I did get to speak to her for PWI, and again, she's one of the top wrestlers in the world, in my opinion. So I do think let's recognize women or non-conforming individuals as that. I think it's time to do that.
Mr. Tony Schiavone, and we're desperately out of time on Duke Loves Rasslin.